never said anything about an android being on board. Why not?
It never occurred to me. It's just common practice. We always have a synthetic on board.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
Right.
Is there a problem?
I'm sorry. I don't know why I didn't even... Ripley's last trip out, the artificial person malfunctioned.
Malfunctioned?
There were problems, and a few deaths were involved.
I'm shocked. Was it an older model?
Yeah, the Hyperdyne system's 128.2.
Well, that explains it, and the A2s always were a bit twitchy. That could never happen now with our behavioral inhibitors. It is impossible for me to harm or by mission of action allow to be harmed a human being. You sure you don't want some?
Just stay away from me, Bishop. You got that straight?
Many car makers say autonomous vehicles will make driving safer. The artificial intelligence powering self-driving cars doesn't get tired, distracted, or intoxicated, factors that can lead to crashes. But that doesn't mean the companies and people developing self-driving cars won't have to grapple with ethical questions. With more on that, we're joined by Brett Burke, who wrote about this for the Wall Street Journal. So, Brett, it's important that autonomous vehicles be able to, quote-unquote, see pedestrians to avoid hitting them, but there are questions about bias being introduced here.
There have been shown to be biases in the training data that some of these artificial intelligence systems have been trained on, and this is especially problematic in the case of autonomous vehicles because the training set oftentimes does not include a deep reservoir of people of color, so the camera systems can sometimes be limited in some ways in their ability to see people with darker skin.
What are some of the possible solutions for this?
Better cameras and better training data. This is one of the issues that we see in general with AI is that it is only as good as the data that it's trained on.
What are some of the other ways that a self-driving car might detect a human or something else nearby?
There are a number of different systems that these vehicles will utilize. There's vehicle-to-vehicle communications, what we call V2V, that allows them to communicate with each other so that they can inform each other about, sort of their planned path, what they're going to do, what they're seeing. There's vehicle-to-infrastructure, V2I, which allows them to sort of communicate with traffic lights or sometimes with cameras, traffic cameras or other elements of infrastructure, drawbridges, things like that, so they know what's coming up. And then there's work on this idea of V2P, which is vehicle to pedestrian communications, which would allow autonomous vehicles and the AI that run them to detect and ensure that what they're seeing is an actual person as opposed to maybe a mannequin or a humanoid delivery robot.
How are companies approaching this? For example, Waymo, which is Alphabet's self-driving subsidiary, what has it said about dealing with animals potentially on the road?
Well, for large animals, its goal is to reduce injury-causing potential for humans on board. It would take avoidance maneuvers, if necessary, to try to stop any impact from happening with a large animal. With smaller animals, when we talked to Waymo, they said that they recognize that evasive action for certain categories of roadside animals or debris or whatever can be add risk. So a lot of it is about analyzing risk and trying to minimize risk for the people on board, people that are in surrounding the cars, and the vehicle itself.
What do bioethicists make of this?
For this story, we talked to Peter Singer, who's a famed bioethicist from Princeton. His general notion is that some respect for animals is better than no respect for animals. So if there are decisions to be made that privilege house pets or farm animals or whatever it might be, he finds that to be a better moral position than just saying disregard any animal.
When we're talking about taxis, people often want to get to their destination as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. And then companies want to, move as fast to pick up as many passengers as they can, but they also want to avoid accidents that can slow things down. You spoke with the CTO of Mobileye, that's a unit of Intel that deploys autonomous vehicle software and hardware. How is that company approaching this issue?
The folks that I talked to from Mobileye we're sort of talking about this idea of a trade-off between safety and expedience. So, if you're as safe as you possibly can be, that could lead to, obviously, fewer accidents, but also traffic snarls. And, if you maximize speed, you'll make more trips. People will get to their destinations more quickly, but then there's the risk of more incidents if things are moving too quickly.
I mean, is there a way that this might be approached with, say, different kinds of cars?
Well, if you think about some of the things that differentiate vehicles for individuals when they're thinking about an automotive purchase, an autonomous vehicle and the AI that runs it could be trained to deliver a driving experience that differs from automotive brand to automotive brand. So an autonomous sports car might drive a little bit more aggressively or choose a route that shows off its handling capabilities. Similarly, maybe an off-road vehicle or something like that might be programmed to take a more scenic route.
One of the big questions seems to be, should autonomous vehicles be held to a higher standard than human drivers? How are companies approaching this?
When a human has an incident, right, we can sort of say, well, they're only human, it was an accident. We're going to hold autonomous vehicles to a higher standard, and we're going to be less forgiving if they're being run and programmed by a company where these decisions are being made. This isn't just like incidental things that are happening. There's programming that needs to happen in order for these decisions to be made the way that they are. And we can see that with Tesla. A couple of years ago, they got dinged by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for their quote-unquote full self-driving service, which allowed vehicles to roll through stop signs. Obviously, a lot of humans behave this way, but when it's programmed into an autonomous vehicle, it becomes a different issue. And so is this a time now with the coming of this to really be considering how we can think about our roads in a way that sort of put people first?
All right, that's Brett Burke. Thanks for joining us for this conversation.
Thanks so much again for having me. I appreciate it.
Come on, I dream about this. I have actual dreams about this, about busting the top people, the rich people, white people.
I know.
Fentanyl is a dangerous narcotic that kills more than 100,000 Americans each year. Donald Trump and many other politicians say this deadly drug is regularly smuggled into the U.S. by undocumented immigrants. But experts tell border reporter Gustavo Solis that those claims are largely false.
If you're following the presidential election, you've probably heard something like this.
No one has ever said a wall keeps out 100% of illegal aliens, but if it keeps out 98%, I'd say we're doing pretty good. And that means less fentanyl, less drugs, and less crime coming into our communities.
That was J.D. Vance, the Republican nominee for vice president. And you'll hear similar rhetoric from politicians right here in San Diego.
Two other things that are very important that are concerning about the border and how people are just able to walk across the border and get here. Drugs and fentanyl, and also human trafficking.
That was Republican San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond. For years, politicians, mainly Republicans, have drawn a clear line between the country's fentanyl epidemic and illegal immigration. They say border walls and other harsh immigration measures will prevent fentanyl from entering the country. But what they aren't saying is that the vast majority of fentanyl is smuggled into the country by U.S. citizens. KPBS spoke with local prosecutors, experts, and Border Patrol officials to get a better understanding of how fentanyl gets here and who brings it in.
80% of people convicted in 2023 of drug trafficking offenses were U.S. citizens. And so they're people who have the ability to cross, obviously, but also are going to be able to slip under the radar. That's the goal.
That's Tara McGrath. She's the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California.
And the narrative that it's the illegal immigration or asylum seekers or people who are coming to the United States because they're fleeing violence and they happen to also have a baggie of fentanyl in their backpack as they're trekking through the desert. That narrative is a dangerous misconception because that's not who we're seeing.
Federal records show that more than 90% of all fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and meth is seized at legal ports of entry or at border checkpoints on major roads already inside the U.S. Cecilia Farfan is an expert on international crime. She says Mexican drug cartels control virtually all drug smuggling along the border, and putting their product in the hands of desperate migrants risking life and limb to cross illegally, that's just bad for business.
From a business point of view, it would not make sense to put your merchandise in such a risky situation, right? Like, is this migrant going to cross? Is he not going to cross? Are they going to get stopped? What's going to happen?
It makes much more sense to smuggle drugs through legal border crossings.
So we are at the San Ysidro Port of Entry, the largest port of entry in the world. We process strictly at this port of entry more than 100,000 people per day.
Sydney Aki is Director of Field Operations for the San Diego Field Office of Customs and Border Protection. The San Ysidro Port of Entry is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has 24 vehicle lanes that are often backed up for hours. In most cases, agents at the inspection booths have less than a minute to decide if they want to refer somebody for a secondary inspection. Aki says that the sheer volume of cars and people make finding drugs incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it could be anywhere in the spare tires, the roofs, the floorboards, the dashboard, the engine compartments, spare tires, a whole host of different areas.
Farfan argues that narratives linking migrants with drug smuggling are distracting and even dangerous.
There is a tendency to always make it about someone else, right? The foreigner that brings in illicit drugs. And it's never a homegrown issue, but it's rather more of a generally racist discourse that links someone else, this foreigner, this unwanted presence that brings drugs.
And prosecutors agree. McGrath says that blaming migrants shifts the focus away from the people who are really behind the fentanyl epidemic.
So when I talk about a dangerous misconception, it's placing the responsibility and the kind of target of drug smuggling on economic migrants. That's not who's doing it. The focus of who's pushing these poisons into our country are the cartels.
Both civilian and law enforcement experts told KPBS that if politicians are really serious about solving the fentanyl crisis, there are real solutions out there, like investing in non-invasive scanners at the legal border crossings, committing to drug prevention efforts on both sides of the border, and pursuing more binational crackdowns on drug cartels. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
Hitler had the supreme fascist state. And what was he worried about in Europe and in Germany? He was worried about white genetic annihilation.
The far-right Alternative for Germany Party, or AfD for short, is leading the polls ahead of state elections in the part of the country once known as East Germany. With voters living in algorithm-driven echo chambers, an unlikely cohort of women is reaching out to the party's supporters in a bid to revive the lost art of debate and change minds, as Esme Nicholson reports.
It's Saturday in the cathedral city of Erfurt. A group of women in their 70s have gathered on a medieval market square, holding up signs that read Omas gegen rechts, or grandmas against the far right. They are part of a nationwide movement of retired women who've had it with hatred. 76-year-old Gabriele Woelke-Rebhahn co-founded the local chapter out of sheer worry. She says this region is where the Nazis first seized power, and now it's where Björn Höcke, considered the far-right AfD party's most extreme figure, is running to become the next state governor.
Hitler happened because people stood silently by. If I stay silent now, I'm no better than my parents in the 1930s.
Woelke-Rebhahn says she's not just here to speak up, but to listen as well. She wants to understand why 1 in 3 people here are planning to vote AfD, even though Germany's domestic intelligence agency has the party under surveillance for suspected anti-constitutional activities. She says not everybody is willing to stop and chat.
The far right ridicule us and think we're just silly old women. What they don't seem to understand is that women become unflappable with age. It's a mistake to underestimate us.
One of the grandmas is talking to a well-dressed man in his 70s. After a couple of minutes, he loses his temper and walks off, cursing at her. Woelke-Rebhahn takes a deep breath and says they refuse to write anyone off as deplorable, even if it's tough at times.
We get a lot of encouragement from passers-by, but we also get a lot of abuse. It's men of my generation who are the worst, really below the belt. And they're retirees, many of them living pretty comfortable lives.
At the nearby farmer's market, 79-year-old Rudi is doing his weekly shop, picking through organic summer produce. The softly-spoken retired engineer avoids the grandmas. He says no amount of chatting will change his mind.
No, ich wähle AfD. I'm voting AFD. It's the only party that cares about us, the people who've always lived here. Right now, the immigrants rule. They come first. The benefits they get are better than the hourly wages of most Germans in this part of the country.
Rudy, who wouldn't give his full name but was eager to talk, insists that AFD voters are given a bad rap.
I've read what the mainstream media writes about us. It's all lies. I've stopped reading it.
He says he now gets his news from Telegram and YouTube. Rudy is exactly the kind of voter Mark Röhlig, a reporter for Der Spiegel, is trying to reach. Röhlig grew up in the region and now writes about it. He says not all AFD voters have stopped reading his articles.
I used to receive anonymous threats, but people have become more brazen and now send me hate mail from their work addresses, cell number included. So I've started calling them back.
Röhlig says this takes his hate mailers by surprise.
Confronting people takes the sting out of their hatred. Most of the time, we find a way to talk to each other in a civil manner, and often end up chatting about personal issues and everyday worries.
But back in Erfurt, the performative outrage of social media spills over onto the streets as another passerby spouts abuse at the grandma. A recent study suggests that voting for the AFD negatively impacts mental health. It found that a year after joining the party, the majority of respondents reported a deterioration in their well-being. Something that can't be said for the grandmas against the far right, who, despite their worries, seem pretty happy with democracy. After all, here in former East Germany, they remember what it's like to live without it. For NPR News, I'm Esme Nicholson in Erfurt.
Medical apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present.
More than 90,000 people in the U.S. are waiting for a kidney transplant. Many won't get one. To address that backlog, a new bill in Congress offers tax credits to people who donate a kidney to a stranger. Stephanie O'Neill reports.
Martinez Majors of Alexandria, Virginia, had no idea his kidneys were failing. Then, 3 years ago, a severe case of edema landed him in the hospital.
I was bloated. My legs looked like somebody took a air hose and just plugged it into my body. The blood test came back. Whoever the doctor was that was on duty came in and told me, "You have chronic kidney disease."
Majors, who's 65, now spends 14 hours a week tethered to a dialysis machine that filters waste from his blood the way his kidneys no longer can. The intensive regimen keeps him and 500,000 other Americans alive, but dialysis is not a cure. It's a stopgap with potentially serious side effects, including infection, severe fatigue, and strain on the cardiovascular system.
The only reversing of that is to get a new kidney, to have a kidney transplant.
But an ongoing kidney shortage means thousands of people who would otherwise qualify for a transplant die without one. Elaine Perlman wants to change that.
Enough is enough. The kidney shortage is a solvable problem.
Perlman is executive director of Waitlist Zero, a coalition supporting the newly proposed End Kidney Deaths Act. The bill, which has sponsors from both parties, would offer people who donate one of their kidneys to a stranger a $50,000 refundable tax credit spread over 5 years.
We are really trying to save tens of thousands of lives as well as billions of tax dollars.
Medicare spends $50 billion a year on dialysis. Transplants, by contrast, save lives and money over the long term and improve patient outcomes, especially when living donor kidneys are used. They can last up to 20 years, about twice as long as those from deceased donors. Right now, about 2/3 of all transplanted kidneys come from someone who's died. The rest come from living donors, most of whom give to a family member or a friend. Only about 400 donors a year give to strangers on the wait list, as Perlman has done.
Those who give kidneys to strangers are saving the people who are waiting the longest on the wait list, and then they're most likely to die from the kidney shortage.
But critics like bioethicist Alexander Capron see it differently. He supports the existing ban on organ sales and considers paying donors repugnant. He worries that a U.S. tax incentive for kidneys could harm global efforts to end the illicit organ trade.
Having the United States now change its position and say it's all right to buy kidneys would undermine efforts to combat that practice which is very exploitative of poor and desperate people around the world.
Luke Simrow disagrees. He's a bioethicist who calls such arguments red herrings designed to derail a legitimate debate on the issue.
Nobody thinks that we should adopt a system like kidney sales in India or in Iran or anywhere that kidney sales have taken place, legally or not. None of those systems are remotely similar to what advocates of the present legislation are arguing for.
Simrow has written extensively about moral issues surrounding kidney markets and believes the proposed measure would significantly increase the number of kidneys available for transplant.
It's rare that we have some problem which has such an obvious solution where everyone benefits.
He points to surveys showing a majority of Americans support a regulated compensation plan for kidney donors. The status quo, Simrow says, is no longer an option.
We've asked people to provide their kidneys for free. We've done that for decades, and asking people to give away a kidney has not worked.
As the debate continues, Martinez Major says he'll keep a close watch. Family members have offered to donate a kidney to him, but if none are a match, he'll join the 90,000 Americans facing an indefinite wait for a kidney transplant. For NPR News, I'm Stephanie O'Neill.
Well, like 20,000 were killed in one day in Bhopal back in the 1980s, just by that cyanide getting loose. They knew that thing was unsafe. They built that plant over there in India. Indirectly, the white supremacists, or it wouldn't have happened, nothing. I mean, hey, there were 20,000 people in certain, in certain other areas of the world die at one time. 20,000, and all the cattle around in the area, that died. That was in Bhopal, India. I mean, somebody, the white supremacists indirectly, I always blame them for that type of thing. They went and set up a plant where I think it was, there was something that had cyanide in it, I believe. I don't remember it exactly. That was back in the 1980s. But anyhow, they had an explosion at that plant. It was supposed to be producing some type of chemical fertilizer or something. And, a drug deal gone bad. The thing blew up. And the fumes spread all over the area and killed 20,000 people. That's huge.
Well, local environmental rights groups vow to keep up their fight after a U.S. Circuit Court ruled a Louisiana chemical plant must be given more time to meet a new regulation deadline.
And Andres Fuentes joins us to explain why and what this means to the EPA and why it can't use a part of the Civil Rights Act to immediately enforce new rules. Andres.
Liz, Lauren, this all stems from a lawsuit that Jeff Landry filed against the EPA and the Department of Justice back in 2023 as the state's attorney general. Now, the suit was in response to both of those federal agencies starting to look into the health impacts of Cancer Alley, the amount of emissions of the chemical plants that they were releasing into the region, and whether black low-income communities were racially targeted by the construction of the plants along the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Last Thursday, a federal judge in Lake Charles ruled that the feds cannot use Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to enforce pollution regulation, but advocates say that the fight isn't over just yet.
The law may look neutral on its face, but when it's applied, it turns out it has an adverse effect on certain communities, like the Black communities, for instance, which are protected by Title VI. And Louisiana's argument was EPA shouldn't be able to use it for that.
So to suggest that they don't deserve some type of protection under the law, it's an unfortunate day. It's an unfortunate day for Louisiana. It's an unfortunate day for our country.
Advocates say that while they can't use Title VI to argue for more protections and more pollution regulation, they can still use other aspects of the Civil Rights Act. Now, we did reach out to Governor Jeff Landry's office for comment on the lawsuit and the recent ruling in federal court, but have not heard back in time for this newscast. Back to you guys on the desk.
With Louisiana News, I'm Karen Henderson. Environmental justice activists in New Orleans are marking the 40th anniversary of the Bhopal chemical plant disaster in India. The Coastal Desk's Eva Tesfaye reports.
In 1984, a pesticide plant leak in Bhopal, India killed thousands of people and damaged the health of others for years to come. The plant was owned by Union Carbide. It's now a subsidiary of Dow Chemical, which owns many chemical plants in Louisiana. The pollution from these plants and the ways they avoid accountability are similar in both places, says Rachna Dhingra of the International Campaign for Justice in Bhopal.
The reason you and I continue to speak about this today is because people in Bhopal have not given up. And people like you have not given up.
One of Louisiana's activists, Joe Banner with the Descendants Project, says since the state and federal government aren't protecting them, they're taking the fight international. In New Orleans, I'm Eva Tesfaye.
Old MacDonald had a farm.
In 1920, according to federal data, there were about 925,000 black farmers in America, or about 14% of all farmers. A century later, there were only about 42,000, or about 1%. Much of that is a legacy of systemic discrimination in Agriculture Department programs. Ali Rogan reports on how the Biden administration is trying to help farmers who have been historically excluded from government assistance programs.
Today, black farmers own less than 1% of U.S. farmland, according to the Agriculture Department's latest farmer census. But efforts are underway to help these farmers reclaim their lost land. Last month, the USDA issued over $2.2 billion in payments to black and other minority farmers across the country. It's a move the department hopes will offset decades of discrimination these farmers faced when trying to secure loans. John Boyd is the founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association. Mr. Boyd, thank you so much for joining us. You yourself are a fourth-generation farmer. I'd like to ask you about the discrimination that you personally have faced over the course of your career.
The discrimination that I faced was more in-your-face, blatant type of discrimination that many black farmers in the area experienced. You know, I was called the N-word. I was spat on. I had my application torn up and thrown in the trash can in front of me. And this person that was responsible for making farm loans in my local county office would only see black farmers on Wednesday. So we named it Black Wednesday. When white farmers came in, he would bring them in, service them. And one particular year, this farmer Earl, he passed him a check for $157,000 in front of me after he told me, a qualified borrower, that he wasn't going to lend me $5,000 of his money. This farmer walked out the door and he said, "Hey, Earl, I need you to come back in and fill out them papers because I used last year's numbers to make this loan." So here, this farmer hadn't even applied and he didn't even process my loan application there in front of me. That type of discrimination put thousands of black farmers out of business. We've lost millions of acres of land because of blatant discrimination that we face for decades. This went on for decades, unchecked by Congress, president after president. I visited with every president since Jimmy Carter to talk about discrimination that black farmers faced in this country. So a very, very long time.
And as you mentioned, these are systemic issues that happened all over the country for farmers like yourself. And of course, many farmers, yourself included, feel that these payments have been well overdue. Tell me about the journey that it's taken to get to this point.
Well, first of all, I'm proud to have led the fight that led to this $2.2 billion payout. These payments are timely for thousands of black farmers who are facing farm foreclosure. These payments are timely for farmers who can't pay their bills and send their kids to college. And this wasn't a black payout, the way that people are describing it. These were payments made to black farmers and others because of the discrimination that we face at the hands of the United States Department of Agriculture. The very federal arm that was supposed to be lending a hand up for black farmers was denying us the opportunity to farm in this country the way that white farmers did.
And I know you fought to get an additional $5 billion in debt relief, but that was held up in court by white farmers who argued that they were being discriminated against. Can you tell me about that?
When I first started this campaign 41 years ago, my farm was in federal inventory right along with many other black farmers. 120%, 100% for debt write-off, 20% to pay the taxes. We're still in court, in federal court, represented by Attorney Ben Crump that's looking to seek those $5 billion in actual
debt relief. We didn't get it. It was blocked because white farmers were suing us in federal court around the country. They were successful in 2 courts, Florida and Texas, putting a temporary injunction in place blocking the $5 billion. I'm currently reaching out to the Biden administration, and I'm asking them to make that happen by executive order, the $5 billion, the same way that they've done for student loan debt forgiveness by executive order. So they felt the pressure of large-scale white farmers and basically said, hey, we don't want to move forward. We're going to do some other initiatives to replace that. But I'm steadfast and I'm holding my feet firm because land is the only way to pass down generational wealth for the next generation of black farmers. My daddy and grandfather said land is the only way to freedom. Every good and great thing comes from land, food to put on the table, timber to build a house, clean drinking water. And when you lose the land, people, you lose a part of your identity, you lose a part of your history. And we've lost in this country. At the turn of the century, we were tilling 20 million acres of land. We're down to 3 million acres of land. So we want our land, and I'm not going to give up the fight. By the grace of God, I think he's going to bring relief for black farmers in the form of land ownership in this country.
Finally, the Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance commented on these payouts, and I'd like to play the sound for you.
The Harris administration, for example, handed out farm benefits to people based on skin color. I think that's disgraceful. I don't think we should say you get farm benefits if you're a black farmer, you don't get farm benefits if you're a white farmer.
What's your response to him?
That he can say that to our nation's black farmers, the oldest occupation in history for black people in this country. We were slaves. We came through on Jim Crow. We came through on sharecropping. And to have someone who wants to be vice president of the United States make those types of comments, that's not the way of the future. That's not the way to bring this country together. But to have him say it was based on skin color when it was totally based on discrimination, and he knows that as a member of the Senate. So his comments to me are deplorable. And he needs to apologize to black people in this country and directly to black farmers.
John Boyd, founder and president of the National Black Farmers Association, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
After the murder of George Floyd by police 4 years ago, lawmakers in some cities and states set up commissions on reparations. Their task was to explore compensating black Americans for the lasting harms of slavery and racism. This week, the commission in Los Angeles began releasing its findings. NPR's Adrian Florido reports.
In the early 20th century, at least 150 officers in the LAPD were known members of the Ku Klux Klan. In the 1950s, the city's fire department only allowed black firefighters to work in fire stations serving black neighborhoods. In white LA neighborhoods, vigilante groups formed to keep black families from moving in. These are some of the details in a report by LA's Reparations Advisory Commission, which last year set out to compile a sweeping history of anti-black racism in Los Angeles.
Part of this is a recognition of what was done and who did it and how to make up for the harm that was done.
This is Michael Lawson, the commission's chairman.
This is an opportunity to make clear the history that was not taught.
The commission's report this week outlines a century of racist local policies and practices, including rules that kept black people from buying homes and starting small businesses. It all fueled gaps in wealth, health, education, and opportunity. The commission will soon send LA's city council a wider report that includes policy recommendations. Capri Maddox runs LA's Civil Rights Office, which is supporting the commission's work.
That report will show us how we can repair these harms, whether they're through services, programs, or even cash payments.
For decades, reparations advocates have made cash payments their main goal. The post-George Floyd racial justice movement gave them hope of succeeding at least in some progressive cities and states. But the movement has lost momentum. Last year, a California state task force on reparations recommended cash payments, but state lawmakers said there wasn't enough political support. It's possible the efforts in LA and other cities could face similar setbacks, but Maddox says that is not affecting LA's work.
Yes, the conversation has shifted, but we wanted to make sure we made a record. And regardless of what happens with funding, we wanted to send a message of how African Americans have been harmed and wronged, even in Southern California.
Any future decision on reparations would be up to LA's city council and mayor. Adrian Florido, NPR News.
White people, we have been the problem for 400 years. Say that again. Let me say it one more time for those of you who didn't hear me. White people, we have been the problem for 400 years.
People in Sapulpa are outraged after police arrest a man they believe spray-painted obscenities on playground equipment. 2 News Oklahoma's Samson Tamajani shows the work that has to be done to repair the playgrounds at not 1 but 3 of them.
This is not the scene Donald Willis thought he'd find at the local city park while enjoying lunch with his wife.
I think that's awful.
Nor what Margie envisioned on her lunch break.
All these parks around here are neat. This is what the kids need. We don't need the obscenities. We don't need the playground equipment damaged.
3 different parks, Davis Park, Heritage Park, and Liberty Park, damaged and littered with hate symbols, graphic insults, and slurs too inappropriate to show on TV.
We went to fight against things like this. And to have this portrayed in our neighborhoods, before our kids, and even for young kids, I think it's awful and it's very un-American.
That was probably a swastika that we've already gotten off.
Sapulpa Parks and Rec Director Carson Lynch says he spent the entire weekend just trying to clean up the worst of it. His department might have to spend taxpayer dollars, too.
How much does it cost to fix all this, every park?
We're still getting quotes, but it's going to be well over $10,000, maybe closer to $20,000.
Sapulpa Police Department says its main suspect, 19-year-old Brandon Michael Arnold, confessed after officers questioned him. He's now booked in the Creek County Jail. In the meantime, all 3 parks' playgrounds are closed. Lynch says he's never faced a vandal issue this widespread in the town and that it'll take some serious time for repairs. He and park visitors we heard from are demanding simple answers and simple consequences.
Let them take and spend a little time in jail and see what that does. And they doing mess like this, my feelings are they should go to jail.
Once they get it fixed, who's to stop them from coming and doing it again?
In Sapulpa, Samson Tamajani, 2 News, Oklahoma.
We are awaiting word at this hour from the Creek County District Attorney's Office if and when the suspect will be charged.
I've seen what's around the corner. I've seen what's over the horizon, and I promise you, you niggas have nothing to celebrate. And no, I won't get there with you. I'm going to Canada.
Matthew R. Morris grew up with a lot of expectations placed on him. Who he was, how he'd fit in, and what he would become. He spent much of his life questioning and defying those expectations. Morris has been a middle school teacher in Toronto for more than a decade. He tells his story in his book, Black Boys Like Me, Confrontations with Race, Identity, and Belonging. Matt Galloway spoke with him in January, and here's their conversation.
When you say Black Boys Like Me in the title, what do you mean?
So I'm referring to anybody who has been born into a culture where, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their parental background, identify as black. And also anybody who, regardless of how they may identify, how the world and how culture sees them. So obviously the book is about belonging and also a kind of tale about becoming. Yeah. So it's about black boys, but it's about becoming black men as well.
I want to talk about that becoming in a moment, but you mentioned, regardless of who your parents are, what your parental background might be. Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
I was fortunate enough to be raised in a two-parent household in Scarborough, Ontario, a nice little pocket in Toronto's East End. My mother was a first-generation Canadian. Her parents emigrated from Poland. She was a white woman. My father was an immigrant who came to Canada right before he turned 20 years old from Jamaica. My mother was a proofreader by trade. My father worked in a factory, essentially, and did a little bit of delivery driving for that company. And through their raising up of me as a young male, taught me obviously many different things. Discipline, encouraged me to, just put my best foot forward regardless of what I was doing. But, the conversation around race wasn't really something that we had in our household until I was a little bit older.
Tell me about that. What were the conversations that you had about race? Did you talk at all, when you were younger, did you talk at all about race?
You know what? Not really. My parents are from a different generation, right? They were born in 1950, right? And I was born, in the mid 80s. So, the conversations that we had when it came to either me and my brother trying to understand them or, my parents trying to understand us was more of a generational conversation. It didn't really center around race, which was fortunate for me because, I mentioned I have a chapter in the book around hip hop. My mother, when I was about 9 or 10 years old. For my birthday, I asked for the Snoop Dogg CD. It was titled Doggy Style. This was like 1993 or 1994. Snoop Dogg was he burst onto the scene and he was an iconic hip hop figure even at that time. And, my mother really didn't impede on what I wanted to be interested in. And, she didn't gatekeep in that sort of sense. And she took little 9-year-old me to the mall for my birthday and she bought me a Snoop Dogg album back when I was in the 3rd grade. So that was more of her subtle conversation, her implicit conversation around race and around blackness. She knew that at some point, I think she intrinsically knew at some point, I would have to figure out my own identity and how I belonged. And her way of letting me do that was to lead from the side of me, so to speak.
When did you start to think about race? That idea of who you were, becoming who you wanted to be, but also how you and whether you belonged in the city that you were in, the culture that you were around. When did you start to think about that?
So naturally, when I reflect on my 3 decades of life so far, 3+ decades, I know that I've always been a reflective type of person. So that's one thing. And when I first started thinking about race, I think it kind of came towards the 5th, 6th grade. And the reason is because I grew up at a time where in the mid-90s, the late 90s, pop culture was synonymous with white culture. You had music that revolved around the Britney Spears, the Spice Girls, the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC. You had television and media that revolved around these sitcoms that centered around middle-class white families like Home Improvement. So everything was around white culture. And, when you start to be born and raised in your environment, you want to belong. So you start to try to belong to those cultures. And for me, in elementary school, from kindergarten to the 6th grade, I went to a school that was predominantly white. So everything that I saw around me was, aligned with whiteness. And because I'm black, the way my hair grows was probably the first time I felt othered. I felt that I was another person.
What were you looking for? You wanted a specific hairstyle?
Or I'm dating myself here, but in the 90s there was a specific cut. It was like a mushroom type of cut where the hair, you grow your hair out on the top. Some people, they put the highlights in. And I can't remember, bleach tips, I think is what it was called. So that was the style, right? The sides were shaved, the hair at the top was long. But for me, my hair, when I started to try and get that hairstyle and grew my hair would just grow up towards the sky, right? I don't know if you've ever seen Kid and Play.
Like a giant kind of, like it's like a top hat kind of on your head.
You know, just like clouds sitting on the top of my head, right? So it wouldn't sit down, regardless of the amount of mousse that I begged my mom to buy, or the gel that, you know, she would go out and buy for me. It was, you know, that the gel and the mousse couldn't face my hair. It was nothing that it could do. So for me, that was my first time being interrupted by race, I would say. And then from kindergarten to grade 6, I went to a middle school, a grade 7, 8 school, and the demographic completely shifted. So within that community in Scarborough, the feeder schools that all came to that school turned the demographic that I was used to on its head. So I went from, you know, belonging and experiencing an all-white environment to essentially an all-black environment. And that was my first time considering race.
What were you drawing on then in terms of what your identity could be? You mentioned Snoop Dogg. I mean, hip-hop was a huge part of as a teacher in some ways, and you say that there's no aspect of culture that shaped your identity more than hip hop.
Yeah, 100%. It was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was the clothing. It was the way people talked. It was what was on TV. It was the references in the movies that were coming out. And for me, around that time, it was almost a golden era of hip hop. There was DMX, Tupac, Nas, Jay-Z. It was just, you know, a plethora of black men that we could model ourselves around.
But as you say in the book, I mean, you spend a lot of time talking about, and you've hinted at this, a frustration with the fact that the options presented in front of you as a black man are pretty limited, you felt, and that you had to figure out a way to interrupt that. How do you think that limitation shaped your life?
For me, you know, I'm an optimistic person, so I look at it always as my cup being half full, and I was lucky because I was able to use sports into post-secondary school, whereas I consider sometimes, you know, I was decent enough intellectually and academically early on in my educational career to be pushed into science. But because at recess time I won races, I was told and being validated for my athletics always throughout elementary school, into middle school, and into high school. And that's the point that I'm trying to drive home in the chapter titled The Ball Don't Lie. You know, the ball kind of does lie. It tells these small white lies, so to speak, in ways in which black males are validated. We look at sports as this model of meritocracy of, you know, look at all these black males who are providing for their families and, you know, doing well for themselves. But it's through sports. It's through these, I wouldn't go as far as saying racist tropes, but the idea that
this is all you can be.
This is all you can be is limited when you look at it from a racial lens, a lens of identity.
When did you start to question your own role in that and the performance that you were involved in? When did you start to wonder whether that was actually who you were?
Oof. I want to say once I graduated university. For me, when I started to question that, amongst many other things, came when I started to go down the path of education. For me, it was the first time in my entire life where I paused and started to reflect on my school experience. It was a time where I stopped and I was like, wait a minute. A lot of my friends, a lot of my boys that I grew up with in my community, my own brother, a lot of these black boys were impeded by school. School was actually an obstacle for them to succeed. Many of them didn't even graduate from high school. And when I started to reflect, that's when I started to realize, oh, it's because of the ways in which black boys are, on one hand, allowed to exist, and on the other hand, become validated in those spaces.
Tell me about just your brother.
Oh my gosh. My brother was, you know, I was envious of him when I was very young because he was the youngest of the family. So he got the majority of the attention. But my brother, he was such a naturally smart person. He is a naturally smart person. You know, he earned valedictorian when he was in the 6th grade. And by the 10th grade, he got kicked out of school. And by the time he was 19 years old, he had spent time in jail. And before his 24th birthday, he was serving a 6 to 10 year sentence in a penitentiary. I'm not absolving the pathway that he took in his life, but when I reflect of what happened to my own brother, we're born 18 months apart, and on my 25th birthday, I was getting ready to start and embark a career as an elementary teacher. And on his 25th birthday, he was celebrating with whatever they feed you in a penitentiary. And when something like that hits so close to home, you start to eliminate some of these things that exist in both of our lives, right? We have the same parents. We're in similar age. And you start to think about what are these other factors, right? And our taste in music from an early age veered. And believe me, I'm not blaming music one bit. He was always bigger. So I reflect in my role as an educator. I think of perhaps teachers adultifying him too early, taking pieces of his childhood earlier than they should have. And ultimately, when he got to high school, more so being forced out of school instead of some mediating factors of asking why he wasn't attending classes or what was going on.
Matthew R. Morris is a middle school teacher in Toronto. He also teaches at the faculties of education at the Ontario Tech University and Brock University. His book is Black Boys Like Me, Confrontations with Race, Identity, and Belonging.
The Olympics got underway. Simone Biles was like, hey, I ain't okay. Take care of your mental space.
Despite vowing to change, the FBI is still mishandling cases of child sexual abuse, according to the Justice Department's internal watchdog. A new report identifies failures in several areas, including reporting suspected child abuse to other law enforcement agencies and sharing tips with other FBI field offices. In response, the FBI has said it is taking the compliance issues seriously and will, quote, continue to work urgently to correct them. The FBI's mishandling of these kinds of cases came to light in the case of Larry Nassar, the USA gymnastics doctor who sexually abused athletes for years. Rachel Denhollander was the first woman to pursue criminal charges against Nassar. Today, she's an attorney, advocate, and educator on sexual abuse, and she joins us now. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Rachel, if I could, I'd just like to ask you, what was your immediate reaction upon seeing this report?
I wish I could say I was shocked. This report reveals what survivors and advocates have known for a very long time, which is that it is next to impossible to get justice as a sexual assault survivor. Survivors are always asked, why don't you report? And the reality is that so many survivors don't have safe places to report because the systems that we are dependent on are incredibly broken. It's an incredibly gut-wrenching thing to read, to realize that we went through what we went through, and 8 years later, there are still almost no tangible changes.
This probe pointed out a number of issues in these cases, and I'll just highlight one of them here. Inspector General Michael Horowitz found no evidence that FBI employees complied with mandatory reporting requirements to local or state law enforcement in nearly half of the cases. Having looked at this, did any of the failures that were revealed in this report, were they surprising to you?
Ultimately, again, they're not. And that's part of what is so heartbreaking to grapple with, is that these are the same failures that we see over and over and over again. Law enforcement has all of the authority in this country. It is a system that survivors are dependent on, and yet there is no accountability much of the time. And then you couple that with a lack of alternate processes, lack of access to the civil justice system, lack of robust independent investigations in our religious denominations, our athletic organizations. And what you've created is the perfect storm, where there is literally nowhere for survivors to turn.
Rachel, as I'm listening to you talk, you're so clear about the distrust that you and other victims feel when they don't feel like that you can get help through official channels, through the people who are supposed to be there to help you seek justice. Can you talk a little bit about what that feels like?
It's an incredibly hopeless place to be. And it's an incredibly unsafe place to be, because what it ultimately means is that it's not just your abuser who's unsafe. It's everyone around you. It's the people that you have to rely on, the individuals that are supposed to keep you safe, that are supposed to care the most about what's happened, are often where the deepest level of betrayal comes from. And it's not something we don't know how to fix.
You are also an attorney and advocate in this area. You work on behalf of survivors of sexual abuse. What changes do you think that law enforcement needs to make in order for cases like these, like yours, to get the proper attention and treatment that they need?
Ultimately, it really comes down to how much do we care. Are there funding issues? Yes, absolutely. Are good agents who want to do the right thing overwhelmed with caseloads? Yes, absolutely. But we put our money where our priorities are. If we are not providing adequate training so that investigators have the skill level to be able to investigate these allegations and investigate them in a timely manner. It's because we haven't prioritized it enough. And the other thing we really do have to begin dialoguing about more intentionally is what alternate channels need to be available to survivors. Statute of limitations reform to open up the civil justice courts is absolutely integral to abuse prevention and response. Having good, robust, independent investigations, banned coaches lists, lists of clergy who are credibly accused of sexual assault, setting up good processes so that we can warn of known predators and we can provide support and care to survivors. And that's going to take intentionality on a community level and on an institutional level beyond what we need for law enforcement.
Now, NPR did reach out to FBI Director Wray, and he declined NPR's request for an interview. But Rachel, I want to ask you, if you could talk to him, what would you say?
I'd ask him for a conversation. Let us help you get it right. Let's talk about why this matters so much, and start engaging with the people that you've hurt directly, instead of trying to just fix it going forward on your own.
Attorney and advocate Rachel Denhollander. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that a real gun?
Yes, this is a real gun.
Do you kill people?
No, if some guy's hurting someone, I try to shoot him in the leg or something, just to stop him.
Mama says police misshoot black people. Is it true? Yeah, is it true? Is that true? Yeah, is it true? Is that true? Is it true?
Several businesses and buildings were burned down, including La Estrella Supermarket, owned by Abel Alejo. Now, he's hoping to open up a grocery store inside a new development that's on the site of businesses burned down and the unrest. Alejo says that's a sign that the community is healing.
It's going to take time. It's not going to be easy. But I think there are enough people out there that want to see Kenosha be a better place that we are going to be able to accomplish it.
Khalil Griffin runs a new children's library that just opened up in the development.
So now it's kind of like we are rising from the ashes, basically.
Some community leaders say progress has been made in the last 4 years, but more work needs to be done. Evan Casey, Wisconsin Public Radio.
Yeah. I want to be a cop.
7 at 6. A major development in the shooting death of senior airman Roger Fortson. Former Okaloosa County Sheriff's Deputy Eddie Duran is being charged with his death.
The announcement was made this morning. News Channel 7's Claire Jones has been following the case and joins us live in the studio with more. Claire?
Yeah, guys, Duran's body camera video from the shooting quickly made headlines across the country after the incident. And if you watching at home haven't seen it or don't know of it yet, it shows Duran going to Fortson's apartment, Fortson answering the door with his registered firearm in hand, and Duran shooting him before telling him to drop the gun. Now Duran is being charged with 1 count of manslaughter with a firearm. The investigation to that charge has led, or the investigation that led to this new charge took months to get to this outcome. The shooting happened at Fortson's Fort Walton Beach apartment on May 3rd. Duran was fired by the sheriff's office on May 31st after the agency completed an internal investigation. Fortson's family has been very vocal since the shooting, demanding Duran face charges for Roger's death. Okaloosa County NAACP branch president Sabu Williams says they have also been waiting to see if Duran will face charges. He says while this announcement is a big step forward, the process is far from over.
You know, trials can take some time before it happens. We're still waiting, for instance, for a trial in the case of Mr. Calvin Wilkes that was killed in Crestview. 3 officers were involved in that. That's been about 2 years now for that trial, and so the community has to realize that this is not going to be something that's just going to end in the next few weeks. It's going to probably be a long process going forward.
We did reach out to the state attorney's office and the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office for comment. We were told the state attorney was not available for interviews today, but the sheriff's office did release a statement. It reads in part, quote, "The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office has been fully accountable and transparent in its compliance with the statutory requirements, providing numerous public statements, making accessible the available body-worn camera footage and other related records." It goes on to say, "We stand by our decision to terminate Mr. Duran as a result of the Administrative Internal Affairs investigation that found his use of force was not objectively reasonable." Fortson's family also released a statement, and it says, in part, "Nothing can ever bring Roger back, and our fight is far from over, but we hope we are hopeful that this arrest and these charges will result in real justice for the Fortson family. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement has been investigating this incident, and because there is now an official charge from the state attorney's office, we did ask for a copy of their investigation, but we're still waiting for that report. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Claire. Now, our sister station in Atlanta is speaking with Fortson's mother. We'll share what she has to say tonight.
The man knot, race, class, genre, and the dilemmas of black manhood.
A man in Dallas was convicted in Dallas 37 years ago for the robbery and murder of a Dallas man named Jeffrey Young.
Today, he was exonerated, declared actually innocent, and received an apology from the state of Texas. Fox 4's Sean Rabb was in court for the emotion-packed hearing.
Clapping and cheering in the Dallas County Courthouse as Benjamin Spencer and family enter Judge Leila Lawrence May's courtroom to hear what he's waited 37 years for.
It is with deep regret that we acknowledge the grave miscarriage of justice that has occurred. We owe you an apology. The only thing we can never pay back is time.
59-year-old Benjamin Spencer knows how precious time is. Convicted at age 22 for the robbery and murder of Dallas businessman Jeffrey Young, on the word of 3 eyewitnesses and a jailhouse informant. Over time, those witnesses recanted their testimony. Benjamin serving 34 years of a life sentence. He maintained his innocence, his word never wavering. The last 3 years he's been out of prison, waiting to learn if the case against him would be dismissed or if he would face trial again. Dallas attorney Cheryl Wadley and Jim McCloskey of Centurion Ministries have fought for Ben the last 20 years.
We went to John Crusoe's 4 predecessors, district attorneys. We met with them in their office. Over all those years, every single one were dismissive of our presentation, laying out to them the evidence and why we believe Ben Spencer was innocent.
Spencer would not be with his wife and family, they say, without John Crusoe.
I know how the district attorney's office worked. I know how the judicial system worked. And it's painful to look back and see that this type of result happened.
I want to apologize to you for this great injustice.
Chief of the Conviction Integrity Unit, Cynthia Garza, herself emotional, embraced Benjamin Spencer, apologizing for the wrong he suffered, asking the judge to dismiss the case, and that Benjamin Spencer is actually innocent.
It's heartbreaking, honestly. It's heartbreaking to see a miscarriage of justice in this way, but it's also heartbreaking for the families of our victims.
And as Spencer addressed the court, he asked his supporters to be mindful of Jeffrey Young's family.
Because they lost a loved one, and the person who was actually responsible for what happened to Jeffrey Young was not brought to justice.
For Benjamin Spencer, justice was indeed delayed, but not denied, even if he can't turn back the hands of time.
I'm just excited that this day has finally come. I mean, it's one day for a wrongful conviction or an arrest is too long, and 37 years of wrongful conviction is a lifetime. I mean, there's no way I can retain those years, but I'm happy in moving forward.
There was never any physical evidence linking Benjamin Spencer to the robbery murder. The evidence that was available, fingerprints lifted from the victim's car, did not match Spencer. They mysteriously disappeared, never making it into the record, into the court testimony, never being shared with his defense attorney. Since 2001, 46 men in Dallas County have spent time in prison for crimes they did not commit. 46 men wasting away in prison have been actually exonerated and declared innocent. Now Benjamin Spencer, part of that fraternity. Sean Rabb, Fox 4 News.
As facial recognition technology spreads, people who don't want to use it are often told they can just opt out. But that's not always possible if the system is used at a workplace. Now a union is saying no, and it's not just any union. As NPR's Martin Costi reports, it's the Las Vegas police who don't want their faces in the system when they work at National Football League games.
The NFL is expanding its use of facial recognition at stadiums, or facial authentication, as it prefers to call it. Here's a promotional video from the company running the system called Wicket.
Instead of long lines and manual barcode scanning, Wicket allows fans to just walk up, show their face, and walk in.
For fans, this is optional, but it's now being required for people working inside some of the stadiums. At the stadium where the Las Vegas Raiders play, that will now include the police working security. But they're saying no.
We have absolutely no assignments that we work where we turn over any biometric data or photos of our officers.
That's Steve Grammis, president of the Las Vegas Police Protective Association. Officers request to work at football games, and their overtime is paid by the team. But Grammis says this season they've hit an impasse with the NFL because the league is requiring photos, personal data, and waivers.
They also outlined in their agreement that said we can give it to our vendors or friends of the NFL. And so we don't know who those people are. We don't know what they're going to do with it. And we don't know why they need to have it.
Privacy experts say the cops are right to worry. Jake Leparouk of the Center for Democracy and Technology points to the example of Clearview AI. That's the facial recognition service that's used by many police departments to ID suspects. And Clearview relies on photos that come from other sources.
They operate by scraping individuals' photos off of social media in the billions without any notification or consent.
And Leparouk says once these data are shared, that's that.
You know, you can always change your password, you can change ID numbers, you can't change your face.
The NFL wouldn't answer questions for this story, but it did send NPR a statement saying, quote, "We've had ongoing productive conversations," unquote, with Las Vegas police. And it says it aims to, quote, "create the safest game day environment possible." Steve Grammis says the NFL is going to have to try and figure something out because he says the police are not going to bend on this. Martin Costi, NPR News.
The feeling that residents had about the National Guard and the state police and the visiting police, that they were in an armed, occupied city. I can't help but believe that that's the same way they treated people in any city that we go in and invade, or Kosovo or wherever, I don't know. I guess maybe that's the way the Iraqis feel sometimes.
Good morning. Yesterday was a good day. We made much progress in building our capability in the area of operation in Mississippi as well as in Louisiana.
The next thing that happened was I get this call, I need to meet this general, and he's at the heliport. So I walk in and I'm waiting, and his aircraft was a little late. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. This brother walks in the room, and he's got all these military guys around. And he's got this little Tammy on, he takes his dark shades on, he gets his little pad and his pen. He said, "All right, what are we going to do? What's going on?"
Weapons down! Weapons down, damn it!
And they started giving him a bunch of BS, and he started cussing. And things started happening. And that's when things changed.
Put those damn weapons down! I'm going to play you again, goddammit! Get those goddamn weapons down!
The black John Wayne dude, General Ivory, is a bad man.
The Red Cross reminding everyone about hurricane preparedness as today marks 19 years since Hurricane Katrina and 3 years since Hurricane Ida. Both storms identified among the most devastating weather events in the country. General Russell Honore became a household name after Hurricane Katrina. He led military efforts in New Orleans almost 20 years ago. He joins us live this morning from the capital city to discuss lessons learned from both disasters. It is really a privilege for you to join us this morning, General Honore. And many young people, of course, they've only heard of Hurricane Katrina. They're probably only 4 or 5 years old at that time. Can you take us back to and briefly describe some of the devastation and the trauma that families were experiencing after the storm?
Yeah, this is 19 years. It remains the most destructive storm that we've ever dealt with in the United States. And in terms of monetary recovery, almost around 1,900 people died, and visualize 80% of what we know as New Orleans underwater. And the levee was broke. and we had about 70,000 people in New Orleans the morning after the storm that needed to be evacuated. The good news is the majority of the people did evacuate from in and around New Orleans. And it was a horrific impact, and shows what happened when Mother Nature come at its strongest and our infrastructure can't hold up to it. But there were a lot of people on the ground, our first responders, our fire, police, and National Guard doing their best. And then we were asked to come help them do what they do best by bringing in more assets to help evacuate the people and help save lives.
What's your reaction to Hurricane Ida happening just not much longer after Hurricane Katrina? I mean, on the exact same day to have another powerful storm. Of course, it did not cause as much devastation, but still, to happen so soon.
Yeah, you know, every storm's different, and Ida came in with a different attitude. It reached I-10 at if we use that as a common point of reference, at a much higher rate of wind speed. And it caused a lot more wind damage. Where Katrina was a big water and wind event, primarily water event in New Orleans area, it points south into Mississippi. Ida was a big wind event, and it took down the power grid, and it came so far north. I think that thing was maybe a Category 2 coming in to I-10 around the New Orleans area as it worked its way over Laplace and those places up in there and out of St. Charles Parish. So it was a big wind event and took a lot of roofs and took a lot of power lines and the distribution grids down. So it was a very devastating storm coming in on the same day.
Well, now let's talk about some of the lessons learned, because I do know that you have sent a letter to our congressman in Washington ahead of the storm. What do you think needs to be done to protect Louisiana forward? I do know that you are calling for to keep AM radios in vehicles.
Yes, you know, AM radio in your small rural community are very important. In your big urban areas, AM radios is what a lot of people have that are available. One thing you want in communications, we learned in the military, is you want redundancy. And before the storm, everybody's watching you, watching the Weather Channel, turning back to local news, watching national news, trying to get the best information they can, or they're watching their computer or they're looking at the cell phone. But as we saw with Ida, it takes the towers out. Most of that work on cellular system, it takes the power out, and people have to revert to radios as a way to get reliable information as to where instructions from the government. And while we have FM radio, AM radio is still available, and it should remain available because when you go out to some of our rural areas, that's the source of local news, is AM radio stations that people listen to, and that's what they have available to them. So I encourage the industry, and we're telling the folks in Washington, don't give up on the AM radio. There are other things that could happen to our electric grid and to our communications grid, and the AM radio will not be as heavily affected if we have an EMP incident, emergency electronic pulse that take out a lot of the digital cards. That could happen. So we need to maintain our AM radios as a redundant way for us to communicate.
I'm serious. And see, they're trying to control. You ain't controlling shit. O.J. principle. Find who killed Papa. Find who killed President Kennedy. O.J. is some light in this shit. You understand what I'm saying? Find out who killed Robert Kennedy. Emmett Till. Still walking around.
It's been 69 years since the brutal murder of Emmett Till, and family members are still fighting for justice. They say it's their mission to tell his story all over the world.
Make a long story short, we are here to support Emmett. She asked me, she said, when I'm gone, Laura, I want you to keep our legacy going.
The streets of Jackson near Freedom Corner packed Sunday evening with family, activists, and city leaders. While marching, they held signs of Till commemorating his horrific death. That death and publicly displayed coffin, many argued, helped start the civil rights movement. 69 years later, family members say they are still calling for justice.
You know, Carolyn Bryan died last year, and we asked the state of Mississippi to at least charge her with accessory to that case, and she died. So we are still fighting for justice right now, although we are finding out more information.
She said my son had a lisp, a speech impediment. When the lady said he whispered at her, it was his lisp.
Till's cousin, Anna Laura Williams, remembering conversations with his mother, Mammy Till Mobley.
Even if he had whispered, why would you take the life of that martyred saint, 14-year-old? He doesn't even know what hit him. He's gone to glory.
The destination sites in the Delta that don't belong to the state of Mississippi, but to the family of the Bryants that murdered Emmett Till. So we're asking the federal government to divest funding from the destination sites in the Delta.
Jackson Police Chief Joseph Wade showing support.
The injustice to all of us.
I don't know if the world knows, but the world needs to know that the perpetrators' families are now benefiting from tax cut, tax breaks, grant funding, and federal dollars from the National Park Service.
She said Bo was a good son. He was killed wrongly, Laura. And if I live, for as long as I live, I'm going to travel the world to tell the story of my son.
The family of Till say they're currently in contact with the National Park Service about what they say is an injustice. I'm live in Jackson, Kennedy Cooper 16, WAPT News.
Context of White Supremacy. I did not know that at all, even though there's lots of new information being released about the assassination, lynching, castration of Emmett Louis Till in 1955. I'm just saying that for emphasis because that just came up in the Catherine Massey Book Club, and they had the incorrect date listed for the murder of Emmett Till, the book that we're reading right now on the zebra murders. White man, Bennett Cohen, he lists that murder as 1956. And I said, you can take it either way, sloppiness, general racism, but that is such an important case for so many reasons. 1955. August 2-8, the assassination of Emmett Till. I even connect those events cosmically. The next date on the calendar, August 29, Hurricane Katrina strikes the Gulf, Mississippi, Louisiana, all those deaths in that region, New Orleans specifically. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade, worthless Negro from Virginia, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Emmett Till, assassinated, murdered, August 28, 1955. Hurricane Katrina strikes land. Well over 1,000 people, many of them classified as black, died immediately. August 29, 2005. Today, August 31, 2024. So I have been told. Dates are important. Before we get started, I regularly do our public service announcement, but since it's a so-called holiday weekend, we'll do it at the beginning and then we'll do it at the end. Sobriety would be best. I almost included that in one of the news segments because they had so many reports talking about that, but I'd already shared one on social media today earlier. The sobriety checkpoints, they say officers cracking down on drunk drivers as Labor Day weekend approaches, and they're talking about all the different checkpoints that they're setting up in different states throughout the U.S. For people in these parts, sobriety would be best, especially if you have young motorists, teens, 20s. You do not want to be out on the road after like 11. If you are going to go and have a good time, get something to eat, whatever, get to one spot. You want to get to wherever you're going and be there after 11. You do not want to be coming back from the party at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe you're sober, maybe you're not. Car full of black people. You are asking for trouble. Sobriety wouldn't, even if you are sober, how much fun is that, getting stopped by enforcement officers at night? You got to pull out all this and pull out that and hope they don't ask you to get out of the vehicle and all the rest of it. How much fun is that? Just be alert now through Tuesday. If you're going to have a good time, barbecue, go to the beach, travel, whatever it is, be alert. You should have a code. Might have sobriety checkpoints, especially if you are on vacation or you traveled someplace and it's not really familiar territory. Oh, yeah, I would definitely get whatever you got to get, see if you can get wherever you need to be, and then, bam, squatting after 11 p.m. We'll get up and deal with the rest of it in the morning. Incidentally, if you are someplace odd, unfamiliar, they have apps, all those same apps and such that you can use to figure out directions of where you're going. Some of those apps do identify enforcement officers, so you can, oh, wait a minute. Just a, word of precaution. Any hoodles. Let's see. Notes to share. 1, before you hit all of the parties and what have you, have a code for that. Have fun. Sobriety would be best. Even if you're around other non-white people, make sure it doesn't lead to conflict and such. Before you go and do whatever from now until Tuesday, listener-supported counter-racist radio. Invest if you think the context of white supremacy worthy of your time and energy. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. When you hit the blog, you'll see the PayPal button in the top right corner. Beneath the button, you'll see the links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude for all of the listeners all over the known universe who have invested, nabbed us, kept us broadcasting for 15 plus years. Our Amazon wish list functioning, much obliged. It is listed under Gus T. Renegade. Enormous gratitude for all the investors who've nabbed an item or 8 over the many years. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. Hopefully we have been accurate more often than not. Should be here midweek earlier than normal. Guest on, as I said, Global Systems, so we should have a guest on from beyond the U.S. We'll nab down the early time this week, a little bit later as we proceed, but probably I think it'll be 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, getting my time differences calculated. 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific for one of our weekday shows coming up this week before we get back to normal broadcast time. Quick points, and then we'll get to some of the audio snippets and then folks who dialed in as well. Number 1, just with the importance of books. I am a big advocate. Reading more important than watching television. Had a book club for 12 years now. Lots of authors and what have you, and even had some books mentioned in our audio segment before we got rolling live today. Even constructed a book club, bookshelf. Didn't cut the wood per se, but man, had to, pretty much build up the book club from scratch, bookcase from scratch, which I was not pleased about because I thought it was, already assembled and such. But either way, got it constructed accurately, not crooked, falling apart. I'm not worried about if we have an earthquake or something and, it's going to fall in a pile. I don't think, won't knock on wood, but I think it'll survive, methinks. I value hard copy books. They're great. I've seen some reports that suggest that it is easier or that you can maintain better focus when reading a hard copy book as opposed to an ebook. That may or may not be true. Hey, anything that gets you off of that device screen for a few minutes, a few seconds, I think is a win. I value hard copy books. But I did see some C.O.W.S listeners, they were posting and saying that, hard copy books are way better than PDFs. PDFs are not reliable and the pages are missing. And it almost seemed as though they were speaking as though there might be some sort of denied access to ebooks at some point. Either Wi-Fi will not be available to non-white people, and or these ebook versions will be edited in terms of whatever the correct and original printing of the text was. It will be corrupted or compromised somehow in this digital format. And victims guaranteed, qualified, certainly reading is reading. So whatever, if you got to have a hard copy, need an ebook, whatever, reading is reading. I found that curious because I guess one, with the pages missing component and saying that PDFs, if you download them or get an e-copy of a book, a lot of times they're missing pages. I have not had that experience at all. And speaking as a non-white person who's facilitated a book club for 12 years, and all the authors that we've interviewed, I have hundreds of ebooks and PDFs, and really the only instance that I can think of where I got a PDF and it was missing pages that close to was when we just finished up was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment. And that book, there were 3 pages that were transposed. They were out of the correct order. And I said then it took about 30 seconds to and put them back in the correct order, and then pristine copy, all the pages are there. It was just those three in a book of 600 pages. It was just 3 random pages that were out of order. Boom, 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 shift back, and we're all good. That's like the only one that I can think of. But what gave me great pause with that statement or with that declaration is someone speaking as though hard copy books, you've not got a hard copy book that was missing pages? What? I mean, I'm just doing a comparison in my life as someone. I have over 100 hard copy books. I have over 100 ebooks. There are way more times I can think of a hard copy book that was missing pages. And hey, I can even give you a funny anecdote on this one. Neely Fuller Jr. Now, this is not present, but I mean, hey, Neely Fuller Jr., you can ask him about this. He said when his book was originally published way back, which we're talking decades ago now, almost a half century. He said when that code book was originally published, he said the binding was not done correctly, which I have seen that happen many, many times. He said the binding was not done correctly, and he literally would get people call him being funny and saying, Fuller, I hope your ideas are a little bit better than your book, because man, your book is falling apart. And he said, what? Do it? And like I said, find out like sometimes they can use bad glue or whatever. And I mean bad binding where not if you read the book 50 times or 1,000 times or you're really rough on it or playing tackle football with it from time to time. I mean like if you read it 2 times and it's falling apart sections, and I've seen that many, many times. Not to mention what I just said. If you're rough with a book or you spill Kool-Aid on it or whatever the case may be, like, are you serious? Like, I know we are not talking about hard copy books as being indestructible, durable. They always have all of the like, gee whiz. I just said I went to the university library just weeks ago, and the report that I was looking for had been torn out of the library book. And I've seen that repeatedly where someone deliberately mauled the material so that it doesn't have all the pages. And not to mention you just, spilled Kool-Aid on it, was eating chili cheese fries while I was flipping pages in the book or whatever. Like, I'm just, that was a bit. Now, to the point about the corrupting of books or them being edited, Now, they do make multiple editions of books. Can I get Neely Fuller 2 times? There's the first edition of the code book, revised edition of the code book. There are changes. That happens a lot. So there are many times where they have hard copy books where you can get 2 copies of the book and they're not the same. With regards to altering or corruption of digital files, like I said, to me, some of this commentary sounded as though people were suggesting that a digital file that you have downloaded of a book, an ebook, that you've downloaded to a device, that somehow that file could be altered or changed. That is not my understanding or experience with an ebook that you have downloaded. Like if I have a PDF, a Kindle of this book, I've never had an experience where somehow that file was changed. The words in that electronic book were somehow different from when I originally purchased it, or I've never seen that happen. I don't know how that would happen. If you have an actual downloaded copy on your hard drive or disk or whatever it is, it's going to be what it is. I've just never seen that, and I don't know how that would be altered in some way that is different from a hard copy book. That notwithstanding, I would say, hey, get reading more important than watching television. Get whatever format that you're going to be comfortable with, as long as you are going to read it. I will say, as someone who has had to move a few times since I have acquired over 100 books, man, e-books are way lighter and easier to relocate. But that notwithstanding, I do like it. Oh, ISIS papers. Oh, racial matters. And some of these I do have doubles, electronic copy, hard copy. Depends on how valuable the book is. And I have a lot of signed books too, so it depends on, can be different reasons. I'm a fan of hard copy books for sure, but I have found PDFs to be very reliable, and they are so share friendly. I do try and help out because so many, that's I guess the other component I would just say, so many non-white people, victims of white supremacy, myself included, struggle to get access to constructive literature. I've heard so many people classified as black and victims all over the world who said that they, can't get the Man Knot, can't get the ISIS papers, can't get Urugu. Long list of books that I think are really important. If you can get a PDF of that book that you can have forever, you don't have to worry about spilling Kool-Aid on or anything else, and you could possibly share with another non-white person if you so choose. I'm an enormous fan of ebooks and what have you. They're so easy to share with other non-white people, cheaply so. In fact, and the technology, I can tell you at the University of Washington Library, they have so many digital copy machines now. There are tons of them, more than you could even count. It is so quick. You can go and scan an entire 300, 400 page book in 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I've done so, and get the whole thing searchable, digital, color if you want it, black and white. I normally, if it's pictures, I'll switch up and make that part color, and then the rest of it is black and white. That's just text. I'll make that black and white. But I mean, high quality and quickly done of anything. Who can complain about that? I'm a fan of the ebooks. Anywho, so that's one. Sobriety, ebooks, reading important. The reporting about Emmett Till, I did not know that the white people who lied about the lynching of Emmett Till, that they are benefiting somehow as a national site or what have you. What in the world? I had no idea. I had not heard any of that at all. I mean, hey, system of white supremacy, so don't be surprised about white people practicing racism, but dang, that is what? Is it they say that this is a national monument or something, so they get paid for the upkeep of the property or something? I'd have to get more information. Read, study a little bit about everything. That's the sort of thing, if I was a resident of Mississippi, or if I had an attempted grandparent or something who was a native of Mississippi, and I used to like go stay with them or something. Like, oh man, you had better be doing some research. We are not going to just sit around here and watch Ole Miss football games and talk about Brett Favre. No, let's do some serious counter-racist study of Mississippi. And I mean, Jesus, for Mississippi, there would be so much to study. Emmett Till and the white people that killed, like Carolyn Bryant Donham, she was getting funds, resources of some sort for participating in killing a black child. Whew. August 28, 1955. Now, this was in the Washington Post. Let's get the correct date here. Yesterday, the 29th, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, the 29th. So that's Katrina Day. Journalist withheld information about Emmett Till's murder, documents show. A journalist whose 1956 article was billed the true account, in quotes, of Emmett Till's murder withheld credible information about people involved in the crime, according to newly discovered documents. William Bradford Huey's article in Look magazine helped shape the country's understanding of 14-year-old Till's abduction, torture, and slaying in Jim Crow-era Mississippi. The article detailed the confessions of two white men who previously had been acquitted by an all-white jury in the murder. The men told Huey they had no accomplices, yet Huey's own research notes, recently released by the descendants of a lawyer in the case, indicate his reporting showed that others were involved and suggest that he chose to leave that out when it threatened the sale of his story. We just talked about all of this. Jerry Mitchell, Pulitzer Prize winning journal, or he was nominated for a Pulitzer, white man in Mississippi. We talked about this. I don't even know what. This was the lead up to talking about the Goon Squad and the dildos and chocolate sauce, because Mississippi has so much to talk about, right? So we talked about this in the lead up to all of that, and he emphasized Huey lied and that he was looking to sell some sort of screenplay or movie about this killing, and so he had other motivations than to be accurate. That was not what he was aiming to do. He was looking to get paid and make some sort of movie about killing a black child. Let's see. Yeah, Huey's got that. If Huey had fully reported what he'd learned, it could have led to charges against additional participants in the murder. 3 historians say, protected by the U.S. Constitution's double jeopardy clause, Milam and Bryant told Huey after their acquittal that they had killed Till after Carolyn Bryant, Roy's wife, claimed the boy accosted her in August 1955. Bennett Cohen, sloppy, racist, lame. Anyway, between 1955 and 2005, it's without question that single most influential version of the story, and Huey was intentionally protecting guilty people. Dave Tell, a University of Kansas professor whose 2019 book, Remembering Emmett Till, was harshly critical of Huey's reporting. Kansas, everything, all roads lead back to Kansas. President Obama's white mother and the whole nine. Dave Tell, white man, racist suspect at the University of Kansas. That'd be one more time white people are not ignorant about white supremacy racism, because there's a different white man who's down in North Carolina who's written about Emmett Till and, in my opinion, practicing racism, because he had the writings, I think diaries, book that Carolyn Bryant Donham wrote, and I think that had important information in it as well. And I think he took it back. I think it was submitted to the university. I think it's Tyson is his name. He had submitted it to the university, and then I think he took it back and all this other nonsense. White people do so much caping, generational caping for other white people, racists. But I'm not surprised to learn that. And even I'm reminded, because we talked with Cameron McWhirter. He was just a guest on the program a second time a few months back. We spoke with him way back in 2011 about his book Red Summer, White Terrorist Violence in the Summer of 2019. And we talked about the Emmett Till case. I brought it up to him this year. He said he was not aware that Milam and Donham, that they had confessed to this crime. And I said, oh yeah, this is, Roy Bryant, J.W. Milam, that they had confessed and bragged about killing Emmett Till in this magazine article, and he didn't know this. I had to go and get all this from PBS. Like, dang, you work for the Wall Street Journal and write about racism, and this is like pivotal case. I said they should have Emmett Till day as a national holiday, and you don't know the basics that, yes, these white people killed him and bragged about killing him and got paid thousands of dollars to brag about having killed a black child, and then the white reporter lied and an accomplice in the murder. That's why I said white people are not ignorant about racism, white supremacy. You got generations of white people who are really the experts on Emmett Till. They know all the hidden information that we're just finding out now, late. Johnny come late as you. Look, now that's embarrassing. Can't even say 50 years late. That's like 70 years late. Who's more informed about white supremacy, racism? That's why we had Keith Beauchamp as a guest on the program repeatedly, and I asked him the same thing. And I felt like, many non-white people, we are not, really interested in, we have emotional connections to white people. I think he might have met Mr. Tyson, this white man, who I'm telling you is another white man who caped for Carolyn Bryant Donham. He might have known him, or whatever the case may be. He didn't seem comfortable or pleased about me questioning and having suspicion that Mr. Tyson is practicing racism too. What to say now, but all of this would be the type of thing like, let's not just go back and watch Eyes on the Prize and all that that is worthy, that has value, but there is newer material. There's a lot more that could be discussed around the murder and castration of Emmett Louis Till. Lots more. And we don't have to get no fiction, the Hollywood that just came, no, because I suspect they don't have any of that in there either. That what? The white relatives are getting money from all of this current day? Is Emmett Till's family getting any money from all this? And all the desecration to the grave site and markers where Emmett Till was killed. They didn't even mention that, but that's something I bring up all the time because that is typical, standard operating procedure, dare I say white culture. They go and urinate at the gravesite, use it for target practice, bring my AR-15 and shoot it up. They've had to go and repair it over and over and over and over for decades. How many times do you need to kill a 14-year-old black child? Just saying. Any hoodles. Quickly, or not quickly, I guess, I'll get to some of the news tidbits that we heard. Then we'll hear from folks who dialed in if they thoughts around safety for Labor Day and or Katrina, Emmett Till, important remembrances for the end of August. The report that we heard at the very beginning about the self-driving cars and difficulties that they might have, I had never heard that the cameras for the self-driving cars may also have serious problems with detecting black people. Whoa. Now, does that mean that they gonna do the James Craig Anderson too? Black dude trying to go out, got my groceries, and in the crosswalk, boom, speed bump, and just keep rolling. Like, man. And that's, I mean, really, they've been talking about that problem for years and saying that some of the AI and facial recognition technology has difficulty recognizing darker faces. Like, how long does it take to correct that problem? Is it you can't find any black people? President Obama retired now. Like, you get pretty, good-looking, intelligent black people to come and get Michelle Obama, right? No, that scandal is off the air. You go get Kerry Washington. Lupita Nyong'o, pay her a few dollars. Everybody likes seeing her. Sit down. We get some dark people so they can recognize. Now we won't run over no dark people out in the road. That's asking too much. How long? It's going to take 25 years, 70 years to get that done too? Let's see. They had the report with the fentanyl cartels, and they said that it's mostly, these are legitimate so-called American citizens who are smuggling in all this fentanyl into the U.S., not non-white migrants looking to rape and pillage once they get across the border. I'm pretty sure that white people know this in terms of who is responsible for bringing all of this poison into the U.S. Same thing with crack cocaine, cannabis, prescription medication. You can just run down the line, heroin, whatever else we're talking about. I'm pretty sure they know Who is responsible for bringing all of this here? Even when they said the so-called Mexican cartels, they're, trafficking from that end and getting all the stuff over here. I suspect that that's white people too. Yeah, these might be white people, hola español, big whoop. They're still classified blanco, white. That's just what it would be. These are white people down there that got up this side. Because, hey, when they start talking about cartels here, who are you talking about? Michael Corleone. Oh, okay. People classified as white, what I just said. Let's see. I played that segment about the kidney shortage for a few reasons. Even I was thinking, could have, can't play everything, and there were other interesting reports. Why am I playing this one? One, we've had, tons of reports, medical apartheid, about the organ theft of black people. That's another problem aspect of white terrorism that's been going back decades, if not century, with stealing of corpses and all of that. Like I said, goes back centuries. But with the organ kidney shortage, now some of that is diet, system of white supremacy, racism in a myriad of ways. He reminded me of Chadwick Boseman, even though he didn't die from kidney ailment. He had colon cancer, but reminded me of all of that and just the importance of taking care of your body. Even, in fact, that report about the kidney shortage reminded me, because they had what I think was a black man. He was talking about having to be on dialysis so often and all those hours, clean his system out or he'll die. I was reminded of Hurricane Katrina. There were a number of black people when all the floodwaters hit, and you might have to swim or hike or both to save your life. There were a number of black people. They were not in health. Health would not permit them to do no rigorous swim, hike combo in 95-degree heat and humidity for 10 miles. They just couldn't do it physically. People that needed dialysis machines and such. That was one thing. We even talked about that. Like, that's one reason. No, I'm not going to stop at Krispy Kreme every day. No, I'm not going to eat, every cheeseburger on the menu at McDonald's, because dang, something might happen in a system of white supremacy racism where you might have to walk 20 miles to save your life. Maybe you can do that. If you weigh 400 pounds, you don't get any exercise. But I know for myself, when I was tubby and not in shape, eat all the Haagen-Dazs ice cream you can get in my mouth, you got to walk 20 miles to save your life in the heat. Pardon now. Add on to that you got diabetes or something. And then add on to that, maybe this happens when you're 20, maybe this happens when you're 55. Take best care of yourself that you possibly can, just so that something happens, emergency, whatever it is, so that you can be in quiet. Same thing, I remember that with COVID-19 too. They said that we had a nephrologist as a guest on the program, and she was telling us about people with COVID-19 or people who had got a kidney transplant. They were more susceptible to getting COVID-19 because your immune system is not as strong. So for many reasons as you can think of, take care of yourself so that you are not vulnerable in that way, so that you can have the best health possible as a victim of white supremacy until we can get things corrected. Let's see. Speaking of health and all of the toxicity, I feel like we mention Louisiana Cancer Alley all the time. They mentioned it and called it by that name specifically today, Cancer Alley. And they talked about how judge just ruled, someone classified as white, I suspect, that they cannot use civil rights protections, civil rights laws, so-called, to try to combat environmental racism that is impacting black citizens in Louisiana. That's why, in fact, when I heard that, it reminded me, one, Hurricane Katrina, it was toxic flood waters. It wasn't just water. Gary Riven pointed that out in Katrina after the flood. All that grime, sewage, everything else has backed up. Ugh, Jesus Christ. But the toxic environment and aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, that's what you got to wade through to even get out of the city. But I was also reminded when Irie, Louisiana native, dialed in a few weeks back. We're talking about ramen, healthy food, right? You get stuck down there. You can only go to Dollar General, and limited diet sets you on the road to diabetes and poor health. She was talking about that they would eat the seasoning in the ramen noodles, and probably not the most healthy thing for you, and all that sodium and everything. And she was saying that she thinks that that might have been a primary factor in poor health for some of the non-white people there. And I said, hey, ramen noodle is not something you want to be woofing down by the boatfuls, but it's hard to kind of isolate to something specific like that because we're in Cancer Alley. They polluted everything. You put lead in the water and made the air putrid. You can't even drink anything out of the faucet. Like, man, you got asbestos in all the buildings that we're in, asbestos and then the lead paint. So it's hard to even attribute it to one thing. That's what I was thinking of when they were talking about what's going on in Louisiana, and they got all this toxic air. Now, they brought in survivors from the Bhopal gas leak in India. That's non-white people, and that's from like 40 years ago. Once again, the only person I had ever in my life heard mention Bhopal at all, much less what is this Bhopal gas leak and what does that have to do with the system of white supremacy. The only person that I ever heard make a connection between those two, Neely Fuller Jr. That was why I played that to preface the segment on Louisiana. And then they brought in the folks from Bhopal to say, yeah, exactly. And then same company. That's why we got Cancer Alley all over Louisiana. Global system. It said coughing. You heard Foley said coughing their lungs out. Yup. And they got books and documentation about all of that in the 1980s. White people most to blame. And then the exact same thing in Louisiana. They cough at a Cancer Alley. And can't do nothing about it. Don't you get no civil rights and try and help out no niggers coughing their lungs out of Louisiana. And then they put formaldehyde in the trailers. That contribute to it too. Remember that after Hurricane Katrina? They said, well, you got formaldehyde in your FEMA trailer. So much to learn about Hurricane Katrina, man. Jeez. We did our part, right? Let's see. We heard the report about so-called reparations in California. Again, I'm not really interested in hearing any black people talk about reparations. Their view, whatever is their view. If a white person wants to, explain or detail anything, great, but I'm not interested in hearing that at all. The goal for me is not reparations. The goal is replace white supremacy with justice. As we were hearing that report, it just started trending on social media that the reparations bill stalled in Congress in California, and they had all these pictures of black people up protesting, I believe in Sacramento in the state capitol, protesting and trying to see if they could get different politicians to bring this measure up, at least for a vote. Nope, didn't happen. And then they focused a lot of the attention and blame on the black congressional members in California and saying that they were asking them, I guess, to do what they could from a weak position. And they said no. It's like, oh, no count, sell out black people, and all the rest of it. But like I said this a long time ago, so you're talking about California, the state where they just tried to recall the white governor, Gavin Newsom, and they're going to try and do what for the niggers? In the name of Orenthal James and Rodney King, please. Let's see. You heard the text Matthew R. Morris, black male privilege in Canada, no less, talking about growing up and how the teachers treated him and how it was a predominantly white environment and how he was, motivated, encouraged with regards to athletics, motivated, encouraged with regards to rap, where his white mother from Poland allowed him to get a Snoop Dogg record at 9. That part even gave me pause. I was like, wait a minute now. They got that big parental advisory sticker on it and all the rest of it in the skull. And like, why is that? Like, they don't let you go to the rated R movie at 9. Like, I that gave me tremendous. And in the name of it getting in touch with my blackness, I got to get doggy dog. And again, now isn't that what I've said? I've said that for years. I have never heard anybody say, I'm going to get in touch with my blackness. I'm going to get this book on Emmett Till. I'm going to get in touch with my blackness. I'm going to read Assata Shakur's biography. I'm going to get in touch with my blackness. I'm going to read about Winnie Nelson Mandela. Every time I'm going to get in touch with my blackness, James Brown. I'm going to get in touch with my blackness, Shaft. I'm going to get in touch with my blackness, the Fat Boys. I've said that for years. Haven't y'all heard that? I said if I would maybe think differently about, being black and proud and all of that, if they said Winnie Mandela, Patrice Lumumba, replace white supremacy with justness. That's blackness. If they sit right on all day long, I bet, but they don't say that. Snoop Dogg. Murder, that's Death Row Records. That's black culture. That's my blackness. I said that when Snoop was at the Super Bowl. I said a black dude with a hood on his head, not a hoodie, a hood strapped in to be electrocuted. That's black culture. That's what we need at the Super Bowl. That's identifying with black people. Death Row. Benjamin Spencer, he wasn't on death row, but he could have been. Poe Benjamin Spencer. Black male down Dallas, Texas. Blamed him for murder. Could have been on death row. They said he maintained his innocence for all those years, and they got a snitch. Informant, as they say. How many of these? That's in the book we're reading right now, too, where they gave the wrong date about Emmett Till and then talking about all these snitches and informants and then mad because they can't get more black snitches. How many snitches do you need to run a plantation? That's a good question. Maybe even a good research project. How many snitches do you need to run a plantation? Let's see. We heard General Russell Honore, infamous by some, famous and applauded by others during Hurricane Katrina. That was the voice of Ray Nagin, and audio from the documentary When the Levees Broke. Spike Lee, I think one of his greatest films ever, 4-hour documentary about all of the racism and travesty of the Hurricane Katrina debacle. But Russell Honore, accuracy is important. General Russell Honore, victim of white supremacy. I thought it was so important. And even the metaphor, you heard Mayor Ray Nagin, he said Russell Honore was the black John Wayne when he was talking about he came in and got things in order. And you heard General Honore, he was yelling at people, put those guns down, put those guns down. That was after they had been looters, rapists, black dudes will be shot. Governor Blanco had just come out. They know how to shoot to kill. They had white people in tanks with rifles. Might have been AR-15, but they got video of white people in tanks with rifles. Black people, shopping bags on the street. Now, they might have had looted goods, raped babies in the shopping bags. I don't know. But it looked like a shopping bag, so as much as you can allow your imagination to run with a shopping bag. Russell Honore came around and said, put those damn guns down. Wow. And you could hear the people clapping like, yeah, yeah. That, Hurricane Katrina. Woo. I'm all for keeping the AM radio so you can be informed if a hurricane comes, but that also is important. If a hurricane comes and they have some sort of major breakdown and they got reports that Leroy is looting and raping, you might be in danger. That is something to remember and consider. Maybe it would be best to evacuate because they said New Orleans was like a war zone. If you are going to stay, hunker down. It was dangerous in New Orleans. Anyway, that was Russell Honore. But importantly, Mr. or General Honore, he said the devastation and such, this is what happened when Mother Nature is at her strongest. That is false, and that is something that I learned, one, just from the title, When the Levees Broke. Mother Nature was not at her strongest for Hurricane Katrina. By the time Katrina hit landfall in New Orleans, I don't even think it was a Category 3 storm. Well documented by the people who looked at this, what they call it, F up. Well documented that the levees that they constructed were horrendous, and that they did not hold up to the strong. In fact, if the strongest had come, who knows what would have happened, but it wasn't even the strongest. It was pretty weakened by the time it hit landfall in New Orleans, and you still had catastrophe. Just accuracy for the record. Any hoodles. Anything else? We got the Emmett Till portion, which that is a whole nother piece of subject matter to investigate to itself, but got the Emmett Till component, Hurricane Katrina. Felt like there's one more, but I'm sure it'll come to mind. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Not wait until the last minute. Do you have updates? Labor Day, what you've seen for the so-called holiday weekend, and or Hurricane Katrina, Emmett Till, important events. If you've been able to share or discuss those, feel free. I know one of the things that I forgot to mention that I wanted to make sure I commented quickly, that segment about the enforcement officials for the Las Vegas Raiders and how they are vigorously opposed to any use of their biometrics and scanning facial recognition features and using for them to go and work security for the Raiders games. Wow, now that could have been workplace racism. I thought that was so important. We had that report from a few, I think it was more last year, where they were talking about at one of the previous Super Bowls that they were using facial recognition technology to scan faces in the crowd. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know about this. And they were talking about this is from a Super Bowl like 15 years ago. I think that they were scanning people in the crowd for this. Like, that would be something to consider before just going to hang out in public to talk about whatever, or to go to the football game, the basketball game, baseball playoffs coming up or what have you, major public events. Oh man, like what? And for the same concerns that those officers had, like, we're going to get your information in for security verification and then we'll sell your information with our other friends. What? Who are the friends of the NFL? Even when you say NFL, so does that mean like Tom Brady's friends? Is that like Coach Belichick's friend? Like, whose friends are you even talking about? The players' friends, the coaches' friends, the owner's friends, all of the above's friends? How many friends? She even a term as vague as that. We are talking about getting my biometrics, sharing them in perpetuity maybe. Oh, that's just my friends. Me and you aren't even friends. What do you mean we have a business relationship? Like, what? That right there, like that would be something. And this is in Vegas, man. Prostitution is legal. Why do you need to have my face scanned? I can't. That would be something to think about. I live in a town where they have a football team, Seattle Seahawks. I don't know. I have to check to see if they got facial recognition at the stadium where they play at. But if they do, 8 thumbs down. That would be one reason. I mean, they said you can opt out of it. They said for the fans, for at least for the Vegas Raiders report, they said the fans can opt out of that allegedly, but they still were using the facial recognition at the Super Bowl. That would be a big one to think about. Like, I know you got to wand people down and say, oh, Osama bin Laden is going to get in and blow the place up or whatever. Or Timothy McVeigh is going to get in and blow the place up. But I mean, really? Even if you give me a list of all your friends, even then, I don't know. Maybe we stay home and watch this one. Like, Raiders aren't even that good, man. Like, we have to stay at home and watch this one. Like, I'm cool. Any hoodles. Let's see. And that's white enforcement. Like, that gave me great pause all the way. That's probably a whole lot of white enforcement officers. Whoa. You're not putting my face in. Like, wait a minute. This is supposed to be for y'all. This is supposed to be about safety and everything. What do you mean? Not going to no football games, no time. Everybody for the Seahawks, Geno Smith, and y'all have to hold it down. I'll be watching on TV for the time being. Have to see about this facial recognition technology. Let's see. Folks who are with us, they have commentary to share. *61. Give folks about 5 if they have observations, thoughts, made it safely through the Labor Day weekend shenanigans, all the rest of it. Let's see. The facial recognition, that was one. There was one other report. Wanted to make sure. Oh, the football. I did not play. I had racks of reports on deaths from tackle football. There are always many reports. Can't play everything for sure. Man, there were so many reports on brain injuries from tackle football and or just deaths. Children, not pro footballs, hadn't started yet, not college football, little people like 14, 13, 16, little people dying, high school, and even I think some of them might have been a little bit younger, like middle school, but these are young boys dying from playing tackle football. I think I posted one because I saw it was a 16-year-old who died, and when I posted that one, they said that there were at least 4 other deaths of young boys, like I said, 16, 15, 14 years old. They said that there had been 4 other deaths from tackle football, same age group, like high school or so. Then once I posted that one, then other people started noticing that they had seen other reports as well. I cannot stress enough. I shared it online, posted it on social media. I know football season is just starting and people will come up with all kinds of goofy excuses, exercise and getting outside and doing something physical and building team building and building strength. And you can do all of that without brain damage. You can encourage all of those attributes or skill building in exercises that are way less dangerous. It is absurd. I mean, it is nigh on 2030, and we're going to be counting the number of children who died playing tackle football. That is embarrassing just for 1 month. Like I said, that's not like we're going back and counting for the last 10 years, the last 5 years. None of that. We're just counting from the season that hasn't even really started official yet. We just got rolling and we already packing up deaths left and right. Come on, man. There's a much better way, much safer way to exercise and whatever it is that they think, young children are supposed to be getting from all of this. There are safer ways where you don't have to worry, oh, is my child going to die at practice today? Oh, is my child going to be brain dead and in a coma at the end of practice today? Who wants to be thinking about that? One of the young victims, Semaj Wilkins, young black male, Semaj, S-E-M-A-J, Semaj Wilkins. This is WDHN, local news. It's quoted, they were talking to his mom, his young black male, privileged, talking to his mother, and she said her son was also a sports fanatic who loved baseball and basketball, but gravitated most to the gridiron. He said, "No, I want to go out for football, Mama. I can hit him. I can hit him." And now he's dead. Yes, you can hit them in football. Your brain computer is not designed to be hit, particularly at this young age. That's why we had Dr. Julie M. Stam. She was a guest on the program right after Damar Hamlin was almost killed on the field. She wrote the book, The Youth Sports and the Brain and Youth Sports. And she talks, it's not just tackle football. She talks about tackle football, soccer, basketball, wrestling, hockey. That's another one with a lot of, physical contact. They let you fight in hockey and stuff too. But we talked about all of this. She said, hey, with the evidence, the fact that your brain computer is still developing and at a very vulnerable spot until you're about 25, all of the brain risk activities should be minimized, if not eliminated. What's brain risk activities? Tackle football, alcohol. She had a whole list. Cannabis, cigarette smoking. She had a long list. All of this is on the do not do list. If your brain computer is still developing, you are a child, That's what I said. I would explain it exactly that way. I'm talking to Sade Robinson. No, you can't go to the bar with Jeffrey Dahmer. Your brain computer is still developing. You don't even have to get. Now, we can get to the racism part, but I mean, just on, don't you think your brain computer is important? I mean, you might be a Rhodes Scholar by the time you're 40. You might cure COVID-19 and cancer. You might replace white supremacy with justice. Like, don't you think your brain, don't you want your brain? Like, man, fast forward. Don't you want your brain? Okay, well then, yeah, whatever liquor they got, I tell you, it's not worth your brain. We can make it a short conversation. Just remind you, say you have to remind you of this because your brain is not developed yet. So I just have to remind you about that. You can't be going and playing football and smacking your brain into the brain of another black person. Like, gee, now we got 2 black people with brain damage. How is that helping us? I would probably ask them that question exactly. How is that helping us? We're stuck on the plantation. You got black people every week, different black person, Roger Fortson, Breonna Taylor, we got to memorialize and all the rest of it, not to mention Cancer Alley. How is that helping us? One, young black people, too. You're supposed to be alive for another 50, 60 years, and you're going to slam your brain into another black person's brain and then get up and jump up and down about that. For the entertainment of white people. For the entertainment of white people. For the entertainment of white people. Keep your children away from Madden. That's a video game for, keep your children away from Madden and the Super Bowl, man. I cannot say that more stringently. If you are a so-called adult, attempted parent, or what have you, and you were addicted to watching TV and watching brain damage football and Super Bowl, I got to see him home get his 3-peat and all of that. Hey, go do that in your room. Close the door. Child cannot watch all this with you. Let us please, I'm going to do a little bit that I can to not addict the next generation to all of this brain damage and time and energy. We have more important things to do, priorities, as they say, than watching people get brain damage and injured. If I'm not being logical, please let me know, because we are supposed to be using a little bit of logic, sense, to try to help get off the plantation, and that's how I'm looking at all of this. We don't need any more black people with brain damage, and I think we have more important things. People fuss at Gus, man, having 3-hour program and all that, who can sit around 3 hours? You will sit and watch 3 hours of brain damage, sometimes 4, all day. What I'm saying, you'll sit and watch it all day long. You'll sit and watch it all day long. And then play video games. Getting the virtual realm, the same thing of virtual brain damage. Come on. Any hoodles. Let's see. Caller in Florida, that right down there, Tim Tebow land. They sat there and spent all day long. We got to watch the Gators, and they chomping on black children and all the rest of it. Florida State, well, I guess they wouldn't watch Florida State. He's too far north. But still, sit around all day long and then get ready for the big people to do it. Get big boy brain damage. Watch Jacksonville Jaguars. Woo! Maybe they'll get to the Super Bowl and get brain damage all winter long. Disgraceful. Let's see. Caller at the courthouse in Florida. Commentary to share.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And of course, they make sure they they bring in 10 Tebow. I think it was either today or yesterday. They had them come to the swamp. That's what they call it. The swamp. They make sure they bring them back. And it was a lot of Gator and Miami Hurricane fans all downtown. And thank you very much, sir. And because I wanted to share. I don't know if you heard about it. Was a black male in Fort Myers, down here in Florida, named Carl Baxter, and he is they was calling him a black Trump supporter, MAGA or whatever, and they said he was called a slave. And I don't know, I think he may have been trying to do a lawsuit, but they said it's in Lee County, Fort Myers, Florida. And they said something about, well, slaves didn't used to get paid for anything. And now, you get to get paid for slave. But they didn't really say who made the comment to him. But someone was practicing white supremacy toward him. And on the audio segment, I think they said that was J.D. Vance that was making of course, a comment of racism about the victim of racism getting those, I guess it's reparations or, payment for the black farmers. And I think that was J.D. Vance saying they're being given money on a basis of skin color, and that's just whatever word he used, adjective to describe it. He said that's just disgraceful, or and I'm grateful to hear the victim oppose those comments. Like, hey, we've been through a lot of terrorism, mistreatment, and racism. It's just not nothing about skin color or anything like that. It's getting, a repayment, like getting justice. The segment, I think they said I was at a park or something where they said it was a swastika, I guess, Nazi symbolism. And the terms they was using, they said obscenities and slurs. It seemed like they really wanted to avoid using racism, white supremacy, of course. And I just think that's a way of absolving white people who practice racism. And there was another segment where they said they shot at I think they shot at the grave or something like that. Emmett Till. I could be wrong. And I believe there was also that segment where they were talking about the kidney transfer. And I don't know if they were having some kind of an ordeal where they were asking people to give a donation for free, or if they were offering to pay people to give a kidney donation, I believe. And that was some new information for me I wasn't truly aware of. And one last thing is I heard on the news, or I've seen on the news, where they were talking about this new mosquito, I guess, virus. It was like it was 3 E's, and then I noticed it had the word equine in it or something like that. I'm thinking, dang, like, because I know down in Ocala, they do a lot with horses and everything, so I just never heard that acronym is EE, and I think one of the E's were equine, I believe. But other than that, that's all I have to share right now. Thanks for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged. Caller in Florida, calling it the Triple E. Have to check out more information on that one, the mosquito-borne illness, as they say. See what's up with that one. Much obliged to our caller in Florida. I did not know the report down. He said in Florida where they referenced the black male as some sort of slave, I guess. Yeah, I did not know about that, or had not heard about that case at all. Carl Baxter, guess his name. I just went to find the report once you started telling us about it. I see he's got his lawsuit and such, where he was working for the Republican Party. This is at NBC2 in Florida. He says 12 days into Baxter's job, he complained to his supervisor about not being properly compensated for the work he was putting in, neutralizing workplace racism. Baxter's lawsuit says on the call with his supervisor when she stated, might have been a white woman, "I know you are doing the work, and I can see the doors that you are hitting on my iPad on my side. At least you are working as a slave," sarcastically, "but at least you are getting paid. Many slaves today do get paid. Many used to never get paid. Are you a slave?" Doesn't get any better than tacky. I hope he gets triple whatever he's asking for. Yeah, that's pretty tacky. Anyway, dang, they use him to go around do what I suspect is some racial showcasing. They say, "See, we got black people who support us. We go around them," and then slave. Don't call me enslaved. If I'm a slave, slave is fine. Victim of white supremacy, Carl Baxter down in Florida. Speaking of the voting part, he was talking about J.D. Vance, candidate for VP on the Trump ticket. He said that Vance, he was talking about the aid to farmers, and he said, "Oh man, you hear this old Kamala Harris, Biden, and them trying to give out aid to black people, and that is disgraceful. It's not content of their character." I so appreciate, as Colin Florida said, when they spoke with the black male farmer, that he pointed out, like, J.D. Vance, you're in the Senate. You know better. You know the history of terrorism. And he pointed out, he said, man, we have been addressing every presidential administration going back to Jimmy Carter. That's 1976. And all of that. Now, see, I would have been really impressed. J.D. Vance, you're a suspected racist. You're willfully lying. All the information that you have access to as a senator, you know what has been done to black farmers. This is the least we can do. Correct some of those injustices and deliberate abuse. I would have really been impressed if they had just, wait a minute, Earl Butts. I bring up Earl Butts' name. Neely Fuller Jr. again mentioned him, but Earl Butts, and that's right before Jimmy Carter was president. Earl Butts, Secretary of Agriculture under President Nixon, so he would have been one of the many generations of white people. We're going to make sure them Negro farmers don't get a dime. Rob every acre they got. In fact, Earl Butts said, "I'm not worried about the Negro. I know exactly what the Negro wants." I said, what does the Negro want, Earl? Earl said, "The Negro wants loose shoes, tight pussy, and a warm place to take a shit." Secretary of Agriculture, Earl Butts. Yowza. Now, he did get terminated after saying that, but I mean, hey, now if that is the person who you as a black farmer have to go and talk to see if you can get some help with your soybean crop, yikes. And that's basically what it's been for 50 years. If not, he said Jimmy Carter, so that's what I'm going. Longer than that, but that's what it's been. Earl Butt. They didn't mention Earl Butts in that segment. Let's see. He said he didn't know about the proposal to pay people for their kidney. I didn't know about that either. Given what we heard, though, Dr. Grubbs, she wrote the book Hundreds of Interlaced Fingers, which is about kidney organ transplants and racism. That's why she became a nephrologist. Her, at the time, boyfriend, now husband, black male, he needed a kidney transplant. She gave him one of her kidneys, and then she wrote this book. Isn't she amazing? And then she wrote this book about racism in the kidney business. But she said, yeah, now, you give up that kidney, it does weaken your immune system, potentially. I don't know if that would be enough to motivate me to, they say, we will give you $5,000, Gus T, to give us your extra kidney. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. It'd probably be no. That would not be sufficient. And I'd even have to think about that even more because, man, that is some kind of preying on people who, if you just go to Jeff Bezos and say, hey, Jeff Bezos, I give you $5,000 for a kidney. I'm gonna keep my kidneys. I might, I don't know what's gonna happen. I'm gonna keep my kidneys. I'm good. Who would do that? It would probably be somebody like Benjamin Spencer, who was in jail for a long time, doesn't have any money. It'd probably be someone like that. Now, incidentally, I do know from the Scott sister case, if you are in prison for a long time, you generally are not a good organ candidate because they assume that you've got really bad health problems. So they generally don't take your organs from a Benjamin Spencer. But man, it would probably be someone who is in a tough position or what. I mean, why would I give you my kidneys? Like, why would I do that? I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I'd rather God gave me 2 kidneys for a reason. I might need both of them. Like, I'm going to hold on to both of them. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to keep both of them. Thank you. No, not for $5,000, not for $10,000. I'm cool. Same logic that I just used. Like, if you were straight, I'm not even saying you have to be like a billionaire. If you were like, let's just say your bank balance was $500,000, so you're not quite a millionaire, but you're okay. Would you take $5,000 for your kidney? A kidney? I'm good. I just can't imagine, why that. Go to any white person, and I mean, it probably wouldn't even have to be $500,000. $5,000 for a kidney? For a random person? Like, I don't know this person. This is just like a random thing? Like, I'm good. That would not sufficiently motivate me, and that would be my thinking. System of white supremacy, racism, that would be you're going after people who are in kind of a vulnerable spot, I suspect. Family member, that would be totally different. Probably wouldn't if it was, my child, my mommy, dad, something like that. Totally different. Random Nathan? Like, I'm good. Now, maybe they say if we do it this way, maybe that'll stop, stealing organs and such from different black people and what. They had the the Jim Matt death in Valdosta, Georgia. Make sure I get the name. Kendrick Johnson, there we go, down in Georgia where his organs were missing. Maybe they think if we do this, it'll stop some of that. It'll curb some of the racism in the organ transplant industry and maybe even some of the illicit trafficking in organs, which is big business worldwide. I seriously doubt it, but $5,000. You all can let me know, you can write in the archives or whatever, write email, follow up, what have you, but $5,000 would not sufficiently motivate me to give up a kidney. Let's see. And that's surgery too, like, I think I got that. Much obliged our caller in Florida, and make sure I didn't miss anything. I'll assume folks got their commentary, folks who had something or thoughts to share. Again, we should be here midweek. It'll be early though. as we'll have a guest on from a different part of the globe, different time zone, global system. What does it mean to be white in different parts of the world? But that'll be early in the day. I'll just make sure to update about the exact date time as we move forward in the week, and then normal date time for all of the usual broadcasts: Book Club 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for Thursday, Neutralizing Workplace Racism Friday, and then Compensatory Call-In on Saturday. But early program coming up as we get through the so-called Labor Day holiday weekend. Again, hopefully you have Monday off, so if you have today off, Sunday, Monday, use it constructively. If you can rest well, eat well, spend a little maybe extra time with attempted family and what have you, doing something constructive. Get some time outside maybe. Summer is waning. If you can go outside, hiking, swimming, go to the park, do some yoga, go to the farmer's market, a little bit of all of the above maybe. Enjoy while it's still nice and bright weather, not too cold. All of that, even if you do not have others, if you're just going to be by yourself, use that time constructively if you don't have to be at the plantation for a day or two as we move into September. All of that said, I can't say enough, if you have offspring, nieces, nephews, younger black people that you just have contact with, are concerned about, make sure, tell them sobriety would be best. They will have checkpoints for the weekend and such. Just be alert. Even, hey, if you are someone, I don't drink, I don't, do beers, any of that, I don't go to the bar, great. You still don't want to be out driving late at night, after 11, 12, all of that, just because you really don't want to have to go through that checkpoint at all, even if you are super sober. You don't want to be stopped by enforcement officers, and just being out that late, any sort of thing could happen that is not constructive. It is so common. Once 2 a.m., midnight, generally, as I've said before, people who are doing constructive things with their time and energy, generally speaking, are not out and about at midnight or later, getting their Z so they can get up and be constructive the next day. Especially for young people, especially even if you are into something constructive, if you're classified as black and out at that time, you are generally assumed to be up to no good. Tell the young folks, be safe and constructive through the so-called holiday. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. No name calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. No problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.